Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Mike Avery has covered the outdoors in Michigan for more than 4 decades, and that tradition continues today. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Eider Insurance Group, Angler Qwest Pontoons and Polar Craft Boats, the Forward Corporation, Primal Outdoors, Security Credit Union, Garber Chevrolet, Brenton USA Hunting Rifles, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Well, thank you, Ken Hunter, for that introduction, and welcome to another edition of the Outdoor Magazine radio show right here on the Outdoor Magazine radio network on more than 30 radio stations across the great state of Michigan, and so glad to have you along with us. How are you? How you doing? What you been up to? Well, we're right in the heart of summertime now, so I hope you're having a chance to get out and make the most of it. To enjoy what our state offers, to enjoy what Mother Nature allows, and she can be so fickle. I think 3 of my last 4 trips we've gotten soaked. Now, I'm not complaining about the rain. Believe me, I'm not. That's what rain gear is for, right? You can fish in the rain. It's okay to fish in the rain. Lightning bothers me a little bit, but I don't mind fishing in the rain at all. But a couple of these trips, it's been like, okay, so wet that everything in your wallet is wet because I didn't take the time to put the bottom half of my rain gear on. But that's my fault, right? But I have been fishing a lot. In fact, I don't know, since we've last talked, I think I've been out there 4 days, so 4 out of 7 days. It's kind of hard to get my real job done. Thank God that part of my real job is fishing. All I got to do is talk about it on the radio show. All I have to do is post some pictures on social media, and boom, it's a work day. I know. I am the luckiest man in Michigan. I know that. I've had some interesting trips out there on Saginaw Bay. The skinny water has been hit or miss. You know, one day you'll go in there and it's full of fish and you never have to leave. Next day you go in there and they're gone. The fish are gone. And it's not like they're in there, they're just not feeding. It's like, I think they're gone. But what do you expect in 4 or 5, 6 feet of water? They're either there or they're not. Is it the wind? I know it's weather related, right? And I'm thinking it's probably wind has blown the fish out of there, meaning the water temp isn't what they want. So you just got to move to find them. It's nice to have a good network of people. When you're fishing any big water, I don't care if it's Lake Michigan, Lake Ontario, Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Lake St. Clair, Lake Erie, you as one person can't cover that kind of water. You can't keep track of that much water. So you've got to have a network of people that you can call on and help out and rely on. Hey, my fish are gone. What are you getting? You know, where are you? You getting anything? You know, I'm not looking for what bait, what color, what leads. You know, when I get in trouble, I just start making, I was going to say phone calls, start texting people. Hey, you know, can you help me out? Can you help a brother out? At least get into the right area. And I have a lot of charter captain buddies who I can rely on, and a lot of recreational anglers as well. People ask me often, hey, can I book a trip with you on Saginaw Bay? Can I book a walleye fishing charter with you, Mike Avery, on Saginaw Bay? The answer to that is no, you can't. I am a licensed charter captain, but I don't run paid charters. I don't want to go into competition with the charter guys out there that I consider friends, that I use as a resource, that I have here on the radio show, that I call or text to get information. I don't want to go into competition with those guys. That's their business. It's not my business. It's a sideline for me. What do they call it? A side hustle? Although I'm not making money on it. The reason I became licensed was so I could run trips legitimately and above board. I first became aware of the fact that, hey, I can't be running What I do is I offer my trips on Saginaw Bay to charity organizations as a way for them to make money. And then, silent live auctions or raffles or whatever. Who wants to go walleye fishing on Saginaw Bay with Mike Avery? And they raise money for their cause. And I actually, several years ago, donated a trip to the Michigan Conservation Officers Association. And I get in the door that night, and they said, "Hey, you're not a licensed captain, are you?" And I said, "No." They said, "Well, then we can't give this trip away." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." That's when it first hit me that I had to become licensed. So I did. So you can't get a trip with me. I took my captain's class through Great Lakes Charter Training, which at the time was owned by Captain Mel Stackpool. Mel is in the process of selling that company now to John Littlefield, who was actually my instructor. So John is a friend of mine as well. And if you're looking for an avenue to become a licensed charter captain, John should be up and running pretty soon. I did have to go out to deeper water the other day and run spoons. Now, you know that if I had my druthers, I'd be in less than 10 feet of water running some kind of crankbait real close to the boards. But sometimes you got to go searching. Sometimes you got to go looking. And I actually ended up in deeper water, deeper for me. And I thought, well, when you get deep, what I like to do is run spoons. So spoons behind number 30 jets. Also, when you see those fish on the bottom, what I like to do is bounce spoons off the bottom using offshore tadpoles. I run it like a bottom bouncer. I'm actually running the Magnum, so you free spool it till it hits the bottom, and then you let out a few more feet, trying to get that tadpole and that spoon to run just above the bottom. I don't want it bouncing the bottom because you'll pick up weeds and zebra mussels and everything else. I want it running just above the bottom. And man, I tell you what, those things are very, very effective on certain days. Although yesterday I was out and couldn't catch a fish on them. Couldn't catch a fish. But we did catch them on number 7 flicker minnows, occasionally number 7 flicker shads, 40 to 60 feet behind the boards. Time on the water is, well, it's a blessing, right? But I have found this summer, because I'm fishing so much this summer, it's a lot easier to keep track of the fish. Now, you combine that with having a good network of people, friends, contacts, right? But now I know what these guys say when, the guys who are out there every day. If you are out there every day or 5 days a week or whatever, or even running multiple trips, it's a lot easier to keep track of these fish when you got all this water out here, right? If you're out there all the time, every day, or almost every day, you can follow them a lot easier. And I'm starting to see that now this summer because I've been out there now. I got a late start on the year, but I'm out there with a vengeance now. When you're out there more, it's easier to keep track of things. So the moral of that story is spend as much time on the water as you can. Mother Nature, I mentioned that at the beginning. She's been weird, though. We did a Wednesday night live with Brad Dupuie a couple of weeks ago, and we could see this storm coming. We were fishing the west side of the bay out of Linwood Beach. We could see it coming, but we wanted to get the Wednesday night live done. We didn't quite make it to shore. We got a little bit wet. Wind has been crazy. There was one morning I was out there. It was supposed to have a light breeze from the southeast. Got out of the river mouth, and it was cranking, probably 25, 30, maybe it probably blew to 35 miles an hour. I mean, it was getting gnarly, like, let's head in, and boom. The wind did a 180-degree switch from southeast to northwest. Now, normally when that happens, right, the wind dies before it switches. Not this day. It went from southeast to northwest, 30 miles an hour, and it never died. Imagine what that does to the waves. There's no direction to them. And again, Mother Nature just flexing her muscle. But you got to love it, because we are at the mercy of Mother Nature for sure. Coming up on this week's Outdoor Magazine radio show, after the break here, I'm going to talk with Brad Dupuie, Mr. Angler Qwest. He is also the subject of this month's Angler Qwest podcast. It only seemed appropriate because This is the 100th edition of the Angler Qwest podcast, so we had to get Brad Dupuie on there. Then Ed Roy of the Michigan Wildlife Council, they have come up with a new campaign for their Here for Generations, a new angle on their Here for Generations campaign. In fact, I'm going to try to play their latest commercial for you. It's targeting Southeast Michigan, obviously, but it's giving great credit and giving all credit to hunters and anglers here in Michigan. I think that's a wonderful idea to letting people who don't hunt or fish know that many of the resources they get to enjoy are paid for by hunters and anglers. So I think that's great. In hour number 2, Captain Bobby Sullivan of Icebreaker Charters talks about making the transition from walleye fishing over to salmon fishing. Then Joanne Forman of the DNR. We've got another invasive critter. The DNR says if you see it, kill it. I like that. Then this week's Ask Avery question brings in Nick Grillo of Michigan Brand Meats. And in hour number 3, Randy Cornell. He's an inland fishing guide from northern Michigan, talks about fishing Lake Cadillac, Lake Mitchell, and much more. And, of course, we wrap it all up with wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Miner. That's all coming up on this week's Outdoor Magazine show. A reminder, my website is MikeAveryOutdoors.com. That's MikeAveryOutdoors.com. My email address is Mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com. I would encourage you to reach out to me. I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts, your comments, your concerns, your Ask Avery questions. Mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com is the email. The website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. More after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show on more than 30 stations across the great state of Michigan, including WZTK in Alpena, that's 105.7 FM. You can hear us in St. Joe on WSJM 94.9 FM. And you can hear us in Escanaba, the Riviera of the North, on WCHT 600 AM 95.3 FM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Rapid River Knives. You know I have a Rapid River knife in my pocket. I don't even need to prove it anymore, do I? Okay, here it is. That's the sound of my Rapid River knife opening. I carry it all the time. I think a knife is one of the most valuable pieces of gear that anybody can carry. I carry mine all the time. I reach for it several times a day. And I recommend Rapid River because they are handmade by craftsmen in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, and they come with a lifetime guarantee. If you break it, unless you're trying to drive nails with it, they'll fix it. And they will sharpen that knife for the life, sharpen that blade for the life of your knife. Pass these things down to generations. I encourage you to check out the showroom that's on US 2, just east of Rapid River. If you can't make it there, go to the website, rapidriverknifeworks.us, rapidriverknifeworks.us. You cannot go wrong with a Rapid River knife. Something else I think you can't go wrong with, an Angler Qwest boat. I've been talking about these boats for a few years now. I was fortunate and lucky and blessed to establish a relationship with Angler Qwest very early on. In fact, when they first started, I continue to be impressed by these boats. I continue to fish these boats and continue to be friends with Mr. Angler Qwest himself, Brad Dupuie, the guy who came up with the very first design and who has spearheaded the Angler Qwest concept since the beginning. I told you he's on the Angler Qwest podcast this month because it's the 100th edition of the Angler Qwest podcast. That's pretty cool. But also here on the Outdoor Magazine phone line as well. Brad, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Hey, we're doing great, Mike. I always look forward to talking to you, and I appreciate all the support and always look forward to talking about Angler Qwest.
Well, we had a very nice, fun Wednesday night live here a couple of weeks ago out on Saginaw Bay, fishing out of Linwood Beach Marina. Nick DeShano of Offshore was with us. That was a lot of fun, Brad.
Yeah, that really was. We got some nice fish. We got caught up in a little weather later there, but Hey, we caught a 26-incher and some really nice fish, and it was a great evening. I enjoyed it, Mike.
And we were running your spoon program. That's your choice attack, isn't it?
It is my choice attack. I've been running spoons for many, many years. There is a time and a place for the crankbaits. I like using crankbaits in the 13, 14 feet and less application, but I love the deep water, as you know, and I love running my spoons. I surely do.
So how are you getting them out there? I mean, walk me through the program.
Well, for me, I will run some lead core on the very outside, but I really like 30 jet divers. I like the jet divers because they're able to get me right down to bottom. When I'm in 25 to 30 foot of water, I can put enough line out and just absolutely stroke the bottom of the water column, and it allows me to cover a lot of water. I'm going 2.5 miles an hour. I'm running super clean. I can get those fish in, get them netted, get that bait right back out there, and I'm a spoon guy on Saginaw Bay for sure.
Is it obvious when you've got a fish behind one of those jets?
To me it is. When I run the offshore boards, I have my flag, my Tata flag, pretty rigid because those jet divers really pull. So once you learn to read the boards, it's not a problem seeing what's happening. The little fish can be a little more of a challenge for some people, but boy, when a fish nails it, it pulls it right back, and it's obvious to me.
So are your lead lengths, you just know in your mind at this point how much line you got to let out? Are you looking at, say, a precision trolling app every time you go out?
I do have something on my phone which just gives me the dive curve. The last several years, I've been really concentrating my efforts down on the bottom. This particular year, I've been fishing 25 to 30 foot of water almost all year, and I know exactly what it takes to get down to that water depth and how far back I need to go. Sometimes they're a foot off bottom is the active bite. Sometimes it's 3 foot. Sometimes it's 5 foot. Sometimes it's halfway in the water column. But for me, I like seeing the fish on the bottom on my electronics. I know they're there. When they're suspended, side scan and things like that need to be deployed in order to identify fish in the water column. But when they're on the bottom, they are on the bottom, and I know I'm fishing them.
So what's it taking, like 100 feet of line out to get that deep?
If I'm running 25 foot, I will let about 100 foot out, 105 depending. Once I get into 27, 28 foot, I'm going to run at 28. I'm going to run 110 back. You do have to be careful because the water does vary in depth in a lot of areas. And if you're 110 out and you're fishing 28 foot of water and all of a sudden, boom, it comes up to 24 and a half, you're going to click bottom. When you click bottom with a jet, a lot of times my Dream Mover spoon will pick up a zebra mussel and you'll be dead. So it's really important to try to keep it from clicking bottom.
I would think one of the advantages of your program is a jet and a spoon are going to run pretty true. It's not like a crankbait that can get squirrely and you have to constantly tweak these things to get them to run right.
Yeah, that I absolutely have a good feel for how far out it takes and exactly the water depth I need to be and how far back. It's great when I'm by myself because I can put all three of them right on the bottom and I know right where I'm at. And it's even better if I have yourself or another person or two, and I can run 9 or 12 rods, and I can stagger the bottom 8-10 feet of the water column. It really allows me to cover it super efficiently.
So how has your summer been as far as fishing?
My summer has been absolutely fantastic. I have absolutely blasted them this year. It's been a great year. Limits have been the absolute norm. Quick limits, nice fish. Our fishery is strong, Mike, absolutely strong.
As you know, I had a chance to fish with Randy Claremont, who is the DNR fisheries chief, a few weeks ago, and we were talking about that resource. And I said, is there anything to be concerned about? Do you see us going back to a 5-fish, 15-inch limit? And he said, nope. He said, we keep a very close eye on this fishery. And he said, as long as, unless something drastic changes that we don't see happening, we being the DNR biologists, he said, you guys got a good fishery there for years to come. And then he said something I thought was very interesting. I said, Randy, compare the Saginaw Bay fishery to, say, Lake Erie. And he said, your Saginaw Bay fishery is outstanding. He said, Lake Erie is about 10 times better. I'm thinking, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, that is absolutely incredible. I've been on Erie and have fished it, and they do have an incredible number of fish there. When Randy talks about our fishery and our future, boy, you get in the right area or the wrong area, depending on how you're looking at it. This year, the 12 and 12 and a half inchers are so prevalent, and there's so many of those smaller fish that, boy, the future is looking super strong for Saginaw Bay for sure.
That fishery tends to, at least, traditionally, sometimes in past years, it gets to be August, and it's like, man, things really slow down. Do you look into your crystal ball? What do you see for this year?
I see the fish hanging around a little longer this year. We've had cooler temps, northeast winds. Honestly, Mike, I've been fishing the same area ever since Memorial Day, and the fish keep getting fed new batches of fish from migrating fish, and I think our fishery is going to hold out for at least a couple more weeks, if not more, and I hope it's one of those years that we have in August where we're getting lots of interbay walleye.
You've got that fishery dialed in. You know exactly where to go. But what's your advice for people coming in from out of town who, they look at that water and they say, man, there's a lot of water out there. How do I start? What do you tell people, Brad?
Well, I would always, advise people to look for some boats. A lot of times if there's a good amount of boats in an area, those people are probably taking some fish. I tell people, it's all about what you're comfortable in. What is your confidence level? Is it crankbaits? Is it crawlers? Is it spoons? Probably not spoons when it comes to walleyes, but you can never go wrong with a walleye and a crawler. And you also, in my opinion, can't go wrong by not putting them right on the bottom and concentrating on bottom fish and crawlers. If a person has never fished Saginaw Bay, I believe crawlers are a great route. Do a little research. Certain years, certain areas are better. Like this year, the east side of Saginaw Bay has been super, super hot. The west side, not quite so much. So do some research. There's a lot of things via Facebook, closed groups, online information. Do a little research, talk to some of the local bait shops, and when in doubt, go crawlers. I don't think you can go wrong.
You're talking about east versus west side. I've only ventured west of the channel once this summer. Yeah, that east side has been on fire.
It has been. As you know, when we fished last Wednesday, we were right out in front of the marina, which has not been the norm for me. There has been a pack of fish there for a couple weeks here. I did fish off the A buoy area this year. I had a group of guys. I think we ended up with 25, and we pulled lines and went back out to where I had been fishing to get to our 32. We had decent fishing in there, but a lot of small ones. And other than that, I've been all east side.
Brad, we talk about Saginaw Bay because, you and I spend a lot of time out there, and it is kind of I don't want to say the birthplace of the Angler Qwest, but it is a hotbed of activity for Angler Qwest. How are things going at Angler Qwest? What are you guys up to these days?
Things are strong. Things are also a little slower right now. The marine industry, RV industry as a whole is quite a bit down than from what it's been the last few years. As you know, during COVID, you couldn't get enough product out to retail customers, and that has shifted a little bit. And things are starting to get in line. We have some different people developing the product in our facility. I myself am off-site, testing, promoting, running the boat, fishing. So, there's definitely going to be some changes, probably production-oriented type changes. But for the most part, everything is strong and things are looking good.
We're talking with Mr. Angler Qwest himself, Brad Dupuie, here on the Outdoor Magazine Show. If you want to learn more about Angler Qwest, check out the website, anglerquestpontoons.com. That's anglerquestpontoons.com. And Qwest is Qwest, anglerquestpontoons.com. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine Show. When we come back, I want to talk with Brad a little bit more about Angler Qwest, about how that company, Apex Marine, parent company of Angler Qwest, changed the concept, the way people think about fishing out of a pontoon. 10 years ago, if you'd have said, Avery, you're going to be fishing big water on a pontoon, I would have said, you're crazy. Now I can't imagine fishing it any other way. Website, anglerquestpontoons.com, anglerquestpontoons.com. Also check out their sister company, Polarcraft Boats. That's polarcraft.com. And if you're looking for a pleasure boat, Qwest Pontoons. More with Brad Dupuie after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine. hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Battle Creek on WBCK 95.3 FM. You can hear us in Port Huron on WPHM 1380 AM and north of the bridge in Newberry, WNBY 1450 AM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by Boning Archery. Michigan-based Boning, a leader in the archery industry for more than 3/4 of a century. They continue to innovate, come up with new products, new manufacturing processes. Whether you are a target archer, a traditional archer, a compound shooter, or a crossbow hunter, Boning has something for you. Check them out online at boning.com. That's BOHNING.com. And this is the time to start shooting and going over your rig and getting ready for the fall hunting season. But we've got a lot of great fishing between now and then. I'm talking with Mr. Angler Qwest, Brad Dupuie, of Angler Qwest Pontoons, the website anglerquestpontoons.com, anglerquestpontoons.com. Brad, the question is, I guess, if somebody wants an Angler Qwest these days, can they get them? What's the availability?
Yeah, they absolutely can get one. Availability is not real bad as far as there is some stock out there. Linwood Beach Marina, Freeway Sports, Lakeside Motorsports all have some product. Lead time on boats right now, you could get a boat in 3 months right now. So availability is there. Now is the time to get them, for sure.
You know, that big, beautiful Pro Troll, kind of the king of the fleet, is the boat that everybody associates Angler Qwest with. But there are some other options out there, right? I mean, other options that are pretty darn fishable. Oh,
absolutely. The All Sport is a very fishable option. The Family Fish Pro is also a very common rig for the walleye fishery that we have out on Saginaw Bay. So there's tower boats that have T-top style towers so that there's 360-degree fishability. No obstructions from the bimini itself. So, yes, absolutely. There are several options to get that boat on the water and get your fish.
What about traction outside of Michigan? I know for a while you were pushing the striper market, the catfish market, crappie market. How's that going?
That is going quite well. The boats are very well received throughout the country. There's some traction in the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin area. People are very intrigued and are really starting to gravitate towards the boats in those areas as well. The striper market's a great market. I had a guy who was supposed to come and fish with me yesterday from Georgia, who's on Clark's Hill, who is going to buy a striper boat, and he wanted to come up and fish and experience the boat out on my body of water. However, him and his wife ended up getting COVID, so they did not end up coming. But there's pockets of activity all over the U.S., and they've been very well received in those different markets and those different fisheries that exist, Mike.
And Brett, one other thing I want to talk about before we let you go is the concept of Angler Qwest on rough water. It's a proven machine now. We know it can take rough water. For example, when we came in from the Wednesday Night Live, I mean, that storm, that was a nasty little squall, and we got into some pretty rough water. I wasn't worried. I was on an Angler Qwest. You were at the helm. I felt like I was in the cradle of my mother's arm. I knew I was safe, but there's also a school of thought out there that people say, hey, because I have an Angler Qwest, I can go out and beat the snot out of it in 4-foot waves. I don't think that's good advice for anybody in any boat.
I agree with you. That is absolutely not good advice for any boat, let alone an Angler Qwest. And it's hard on the crew, it's hard on the equipment, and absolutely hard on the boat as well. And as we got caught in it, what's critical is a person is monitoring the throttle, trim it up a little bit, hit the waves at the right angle, and it can be as smooth as can be. So common sense always has to be applied when using an Angler Qwest or any boat on the water. So that is important. People need to keep that in mind, and that is excellent advice, what you just said, Mike.
Well, I know in your new role there, too, I say new role, now more of an ambassador and fishing and promoting. You've also got Polar Craft under, I don't want to say under your wing, but they're part of your responsibilities as well. What are the plans for that Polar Craft?
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. I've got a 2010 Center Console Outlander that's actually in final finishing right now. I'm going to be getting it rigged up with an iTroll. It'll have a kicker. It's going to have a 150 Merc, a 9.9 kicker, Panoptics. That boat really gravitates to me because of the versatility for jigging the Saginaw River, the Detroit River. I want to utilize it to go jig and cast for cohos in Platte Bay here in September. I want to jig kings in the river mouth. That is going to be a boat that I'm going to be taking throughout the state, throughout the Midwest, and really targeting hot fisheries and show how that boat can work on those fisheries. So I'm super excited about that. It's going to be my mobile boat. That's going to be the hot fishery boat, and I hope you'll come join me on it, Mike.
Well, I think you can count on that. Brad Dupuie, Mr. Angler Qwest, congrats on the success of the franchise, the concept, what you guys have accomplished, and I'll look forward to talking with you again soon. And thanks again for joining us on this edition of the Angler Qwest podcast. Folks can find that by the time they hear the radio show, that will be online at anglerquestpontoons.com, anglerquestpontoons.com. Also on my website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. We'll take a break. When we come back, Ed Roy of the Michigan Wildlife Council talks about some new spots that they're running for their Here for Generations campaign. I think it's a very interesting spot. We'll play that spot for you and get Ed's reaction to that and more coming up in hour number 2. Captain Bobby Sullivan of Icebreaker Charters talks about the transition from walleye fishing to salmon. Joanne Forman of the DNR, and then Nick Grillo from Michigan Brand Meats. And in our third hour, Randy Cornell talks inland fishing, and wild game chef Dixie Dave Miner wraps it all up. Coming up this week right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Caro on 2 stations, WKYO 1360 AM and WIDL 92.1 FM. You can hear us in Ludington on News 97.98, 98.7 WLDN. And you can hear us north of the bridge in Iron Mountain on WMIQ 1450 AM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Killer Food Plots. Now, I know we had Rich Krazan of Killer Food Plots on the show last week, and he said, you know, the month of July is really kind of a slow time in actual putting in your food plots. You know, you can still do the prep, you can do the soil testing, you can kill off the weeds, you can do that type of thing, but you probably aren't going to be planting seed now until the month of August. But you can use this time to get ready, and Killer Food Plots, I think, is a great resource. Head to their website, killerfoodplots.com, killerfoodplots.com. And learn what the company has to offer. A great Michigan-based family-owned company. You know I love that. And when we talk to Rich here on the show, it's obvious he's very, very knowledgeable and passionate about helping his clients, his customers, get the best results that they can. So go to the website, killerfoodplots.com, killerfoodplots.com. We were not able to reach Ed Roy from the Michigan Wildlife Council, but I want to talk about this topic for just a minute anyway. The Michigan Wildlife Council is a group that's been around for several years now. When I first heard about these people, I sought them out. I said, I'm fascinated by the concept of what you folks are going to be about. I would like to be a part of it. I would like to help you promote it. And that concept is promoting hunting and fishing and hunters and anglers here in the state of Michigan, primarily to the non-fishing and hunting community. Now, you might say, why is that important? It's important because there are more people in this state now who don't hunt or fish than do. And if you're hearing me in the UP or Northern Lower, you think, Avery, that's crazy. But it's not. If you go downstate, and I realize there are still hardcore hunters and anglers downstate, hardcore. But they're outnumbered, and I'm not going to say they're outnumbered by antis. They're outnumbered by people who just don't participate. I look at our population this way. You've got those of us who hunt and fish on one side of the spectrum. We are probably hardcore. We are committed. We are dedicated. It's part of our lifestyle. It's our history and tradition, and nothing's going to change us. Then you've got the other end of the spectrum, the hardcore antis. I believe they are misguided. I believe they are uneducated, but they are committed to what they believe, and you are not going to change them either. So, okay, 10% on one end, 10% on the other, whatever the numbers are. But then you've got this 80%, or whatever the number is, in the middle, who are non-hunters and anglers, but they're also not anti-hunting and angling. They're just ignorant, and I don't mean that in a negative way. They just don't have a frame of reference. They have no experience to draw from. So when a hunting or fishing related issue comes up on the ballot, how are they going to vote? They're going to vote by whatever PR or marketing campaign they've heard. So if the antis come out, as they always do, because the antis are very well funded and they're very well organized, they're going to come out with this campaign and saying, vote no on this, whatever the issue is. Think dove hunt, think wolf hunt, whatever the issue is. So the Michigan Wildlife Council and their Here for Generations campaign, the website, by the way, hereformioutdoors.org, is... Okay, let me start this again. They are reaching the population that doesn't hunt or fish. Now, I'm going to play a spot for you. You may have just heard it during the break. Take it. This is 30 seconds long. Listen to this.
Okay, one more. Awesome, thank you. The perfect hiking pick. Don't thank me. Thank all the people behind the scenes that make enjoying Michigan's nature possible. Like park rangers. And people who hunt and fish. Hunt and fish? Yes. Not only does hunting and fishing help with wildlife management, license fees fund the conservation work that goes into maintaining these shared spaces. For us and for wildlife.
Thank you, everyone!
Not so loud. You'll scare the animals. Michigan wildlife depends on us. Learn more at hereformioutdoors.org.
Now, that spot is obviously geared at Southeast Michigan. That's where it's running. That's where it's airing. But it gives us, hunters and anglers, full credit, which I think is fascinating. I think it's very exciting. So, again, it's why I think the Michigan Wildlife Council is doing a great job. Their website, hereformioutdoors.org, hereformioutdoors.org. And we'll see if we can't get Ed or somebody else from the Wildlife Council on the air here sometime in the next few weeks. Coming up in our second hour this week, Bobby Sullivan, Captain Bobby Sullivan of Icebreaker Charters. Bobby rose to, I'm going to say, prominence in the fishing world a couple of years ago when one of his clients caught a new state record king salmon of 41 pounds and change on Lake Michigan. I never expected to see that record broken in my life, but it was. I want to talk to Bobby about the concept. He spent all summer walleye fishing. Now he's going to make the transition to salmon fishing. I want to talk to him about that. What is involved from a gear perspective, from a fishing perspective, from a mental perspective. Then we'll check in with Joanne Forman of the DNR. There's a new invader coming. And if you see it, they want you to kill it. And then our Ask Avery segment checks in with Nick Grillo of Michigan Brand Meats. In hour 3, we're talking inland fishing. They kind of a fishing theme this week, right? It's only, what do you expect in the middle of July? And, of course, we'll wrap it all up with wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Miner, and I'll probably have a fish recipe from him as well. My name is Mike Avery. My website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. My email address, Mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com. More coming up in hour 2 of Outdoor Magazine.
Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Mike Avery has covered the outdoors in Michigan for more than 4 decades, and that tradition continues today. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Eider Insurance Group, Angler Qwest Pontoons and Polar Craft Boats, the Forward Corporation, Primal Outdoors, Security Credit Union, Garber Chevrolet, Brenton USA Hunting Rifles, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Indeed, this is the big guy, Mike Avery. Thank you, Ken Hunter, for that introduction. And welcome to hour number 2 of this week's Outdoor Magazine radio show. Heard on more than 30 radio stations across the great state of Michigan. Not to be confused with an outdoor podcast. This is an outdoor radio show. Syndicated 3-hour weekly radio show heard on more than 30 stations across the great state of Michigan. I make the distinction between broadcasting and podcasting every week. And I've got to force myself to stop doing this because in the overall scheme of things, from your perspective, I'm sure it makes no difference at all. And I get that. It's just, sometimes I get an idea in my head and I have a hard time getting rid of it. To me, it's a big deal because look around. Do a search on the web and see how many syndicated statewide outdoor radio shows you can find. And then do a search on how many outdoor podcasts you can find. And you'll see that it is kind of a big deal in some ways, I guess, if you're the host of the show. I do think the best way to listen to the show, if you can, is on your local AM or FM station. If you can't, if your local affiliate doesn't carry all 3 hours of the show, or if you live in some part of our state not covered by the broadcast signal, I do have a podcast version of the show available, and it's identical. It's the same content. You can hear that podcast on my website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. I also put it on my Facebook page. You can hear it on Amazon Music, on Audible. When it got to be on Audible, I thought that was a big deal because I listen to a lot of books on Audible. Twitter, if anybody's still on Twitter, it's also out on Twitter. LinkedIn, Apple Music, Google Play, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, Player, FM, Deezer, Odyssey, and on YouTube. I know. What are you doing putting a radio show up on YouTube? Well, it's up there and people can watch/listen to it every week. I do like podcasting, though. And each month I do a podcast for offshore tackle, polar craft boats, primal outdoors, and angler quest boats. And if you were with me in hour number 1 of this week's radio show, you heard me talking with Brad Dupuie, Mr. Angler Quest. He is also the guest on this month's Angler Quest podcast because it's the 100th edition of the Angler Quest podcast. Regardless, though, of how you are hearing my voice, when you are hearing my voice, the broadcast version of the podcast, I got to tell you how much I appreciate it because I would not be able to continue to do this if there wasn't an audience. If you didn't follow my social media posts, if you didn't listen to the radio show, listen to the podcast. And, I've still got a few more years in me, I think. God willing, and of course that's the big if, right? God willing, I plan to continue this radio show for several more years. People say, when are you going to retire? Avery, you just turned 65, time to retire. But it's not. Not for me. I love what I'm doing. I enjoy it. It's not physically demanding. So I plan to continue to do this for a long time yet. But I couldn't do it without your support. And again, thank you very, very much. I always say that one of the best things about what I've been able to do in my career is the fact that, aside from going to some really cool places and doing some cool things, I've really had the chance to meet and get to know some wonderful people, some top-notch people. I think the folks in the outdoor world, the people who hunt and fish and shoot and trap, are the salt of the earth. Hardworking people, love their family, love the outdoors. Bobby Sullivan is one of those guys. I've only known Bobby for a couple of years, but I'd like to think I can think of him as a friend at this point. And he's one of those guys when I have a slow day on the base. Bobby, can you help a brother out, Bobby? Bobby, his name really became known in the fishing business a couple of years ago when one of his clients caught a new state record king salmon, 41 pounds and change. And as I said earlier, I never thought that would happen. Not in my lifetime. So I've had Bobby on the show a couple times. I've had him on the Polar Craft podcast because he runs a Polar Craft. And it seemed like a good time to get him back on the radio show now because Bobby's making the transition from fishing walleye on the east side of the state, taking his operation, his charter business, to the west side of the state and fishing for kings. And he graciously agreed to give me some time. Bobby, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Always a pleasure. Listen, I last saw you at the fish cleaning station at Linwood Beach Marina after we did that Wednesday Night Live. That was a pretty wet night, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. We beat the storm in, but it looked like you guys got a little wet there. That was, we had probably 6 inches of water outside the fish cleaning station by the time we were done cleaning fish.
I'm not complaining about the rain. We need it, but the timing was just bad. That's all.
Yep.
Hey, Bobby, also, one of the recent times I had you on the show, you had just made the decision to take your charter business to a full-time deal. Now that I know what a significant decision that is when you decide to jump into something full-time. How's that been working out for you?
It's been working good. I've been keeping just about as busy as I want to be right now. It could always be busier, but if how it's happened this year, next year should be even better. So I'm really excited and happy that I did this.
That one salmon, out of all the fish you've ever caught, that one salmon really changed things, didn't it?
It did. It opened my business up to a lot of people that would have never known about me. So we were very blessed that we caught that fish. And it's something that, I'll never forget, obviously.
Well, you've told the story here on the show before, but we have new listeners all the time. So walk me through it again. This was 2 years ago now, wasn't it?
So it was in 21.
21. Okay, okay, 2 years 21. Ago. Yep.
We were, so I keep my boat docked in Ludington, Michigan at Ray's Marina. And that morning we just got set up at Big Sable Point. And it was actually our first fish to go. I wasn't done setting all the rods yet. The fish hit a 350 weighted steel rod. I had a moonshine raspberry carbon on it. That fish hit, and it took out a lot of line. It wasn't like a crazy fight, but it just took forever. It was probably 40, 45 minutes by the time we got into the boat. I had to slow the boat down. I think we caught a coho while we were catching it, and I had a 30-pound scale on my boat, and it basically bottomed the 30-pound scale out. And I was like, man, how big is this fish? And I thought it was 40. Then I started second-guessing myself, and things got real once we got back to the marina and waited on the scale here. And, you start second-guessing yourself. Is that scale really true? So we took it uptown, got it weighed. We took it to Captain Chuck's, and that's when everything really set in. It was like, oh, my God, this could be a state record here. So,
everybody has a dream of doing something like that. I don't care what you're involved in, but you have this dream of, okay, being the biggest, the best, setting a record, whatever it is. In hunting and fishing, we talk about, record animals, record fish. My gosh, who wouldn't love to catch a new state record walleye? It's been out there since 1958. Your state record salmon, Bobby, I never dreamed it would be broken after the glory days from years ago. I just didn't think it was going to happen again.
Yeah, I never thought so either. Our biggest fish that we've caught up until that point was 31 pounds, and we've caught a couple 30-pounders since then. But to catch a fish that big, you would never think it would ever happen to you. But, they're out there, I guess.
Yeah. What did the biologists say? Did that fish spend an extra year out in the big lake, or what? Did they come up with a theory on why it was so darn big?
Yeah, so they came out, they did a couple scale samples, I believe, on the fish, and it came out last year that fish was a 5-year-old fish.
Because kings normally spawn and die after 4 years.
Yes, that's correct. 3 and 4. 3 and 4.
Did this, you said it was your first fish, so was it still dark out when you hit this fish?
Yeah, it was just breaking daylight. So, by the time we caught it, it was pretty well daylight. But yeah, it was just breaking day, right first thing in the morning.
Well, and another part of this story that makes it so interesting is you had just 2 years ago kind of made your transition from Saginaw Bay walleye over to Lake Michigan salmon. You're not a full-time salmon guy.
Yeah, well, I've always came over here my whole life. We'd always come over for the month of August is when we would come over. And so I've been over here ever since I was a little kid, and I've chartered over here for the month, but it seems like the last couple of years I'm coming earlier and earlier over here. We just actually pulled the boat over yesterday. We were going to fish this morning, but we decided to sleep in, so we'll get after it tonight.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. It's a good day to sleep in. We're talking with Captain Bobby Sullivan of Icebreaker Charters. His website, icebreakerfishingcharters.com. That's icebreakerfishingcharters.com. After the break, I want to talk more to Bobby about the change, the transition from fishing for walleye to fishing for salmon. Walleye are great fish. They're great eating fish, but they don't fight. They're not hard on your gear. They don't take out drag. You're not running 300 copper. It's a whole different mindset. So what's involved in changing the setup of your boat from a walleye fishing rig over to a salmon rig? And then what's the mental aspect of that too? It's a whole different game. We'll talk to Bobby Sullivan about that and more after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Sheboygan on Big Country Gold, WCBY, 1240 AM, 100.7 FM. You can hear us in Houghton Lake on 98.5 WUPS. And you can hear us north of the bridge in Marquette on WDMJ, 1320 AM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by VersaSkins. Just change your skin for the season you're in. Michigan-based VersaSkins. Company owner Paul Perone has come up with a great concept. Why spend a whole bunch of money on different sets of hunting clothes when you can buy one good quality set and snap on and zip on an outer shell that changes the camo pattern? You think about it, it's like, why didn't somebody come up with this before? Well, Paul Perone did, and he put a VersaSkins label on it. Go to the website, versaskins.com. That's versaskins.com. And if you're looking for big sizes, 4 or 5X, VersaSkins can help you out. Versaskins.com is the website. Talking now with Captain Bobby Sullivan of Icebreaker Charters. His website, icebreakerfishingcharters.com, icebreakerfishingcharters.com. Bobby has just moved over from Saginaw Bay walleye to Lake Michigan Kings. He's fishing out of Ludington now. Bobby, you said you've been fishing that area, though, recreationally, too, your entire life.
Yeah, ever since I was a little kid. I would say, 8, 9, we used to come over here, and Dad would take a couple weeks off in August, and we just come over here fishing.
Did you ever think when you were a kid, doing that for fun with your dad, that you'd end up as a captain fishing like you do? Or was that always the goal?
It was something I always wanted to do, but I never really thought it would happen. But it was kind of a goal of mine for years. And, I used to always fish with him all the time. And when he passed away 8 years ago is when I got my license. And I was like, all right, it's time for me to start doing this now.
When you do something like this, I'm saying this because I know your wife is nearby, you're fishing with your wife, it takes the commitment of your better half too, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's really been supported through all of it. I'm going to be over here basically for the next 2 months. We're going to fish until Sunday this week. Then I'm going to go home for a week. And, we might not see each other for a month or so. If I get a blow day, I'll go home. But she's been really supportive of it.
So what's involved in this transition, Bobby? Obviously, you're switching all the gear out on your boat.
Yeah, so, between pulling the boat, which takes, an hour or so to get the boat out of the water. Then it takes, on my boat, walleye fishing, I probably have 35, 40 rods in the boat, whether they're in the rod holders. It's removing all the tackle off the boat, which you don't realize how much you have until you start taking things off the boat. So I probably have a day of, cleaning the boat up, taking all the walleye fishing stuff off it. Then all night last night, once we got over here, I had all my salmon gear loaded up in my truck, and it's moving everything back into the boat, finding a home for everything. So it is about a 2-day transition to get everything switched over.
And you say that's
on a bigger scale is what I do.
Yeah. So. Well, and you say your salmon gear. What does that involve? You go from 8-foot medium light rods basically to what? What are you running for Kings?
Yeah, downrigger rods. I have 8-foot medium Shimano Tellura rods, and I have some 11.5-foot Dipsy diver rods. Most of the rods are all around 8.5, 9 foot, but they're a lot heavier rod than what we use on the bay. On the bay, I would use a medium. Over here, it's a lot of medium heavy stuff like that.
What pound test do you run? I mean, you got clients on the boat who may or may not have experience. They might be a little rougher on your gear. They don't have the finesse just because they don't have the experience. What pound test are you running?
Yeah, so the last couple of years, I started running heavier line. I'm running 30-pound monofilament on my downrigger rods. The way I look at it, I might lose out on a couple bites, but I'm not going to break off as many fish. On my weighted steel rods and my lead core and copper rods, I'm running a 30-pound test on those. I'm running a 30-pound test fluorocarbon leaders on those. Then my dip sea divers, we run really long leaders off our diver, and we're hand lining fish into the boat. Once the diver gets to the rod tip, I'm running 50-pound on those, just so you can grab that line and make it a little bit easier. Yeah.
Back when I was fishing Lake Michigan Kings a lot, it was a downrigger fishery. If you were adventurous, you put a stacker or slider and maybe ran a couple of dipsies. And man, you were styling. These days, it's completely changed. I mean, you guys don't even rely on riggers like you used to, do you?
Yeah, we still do. Growing up, we used to always run 4 or 5 downriggers. Now I just have 3 on my boat. Last year, we had a really good downrigger bite. And, there was a lot of cohos and steelhead around, and we were catching fish on our free sliders. So I did, those are always my first rods set first thing in the morning. Then I'll start creeping some divers out. But, there's days when we won't touch a fish on a downrigger. So, you're relying on your wire divers or your copper rods.
And is it at this time of year, is it primarily a spoon bite? Do you not go into body baits till later into August?
Yeah, so right now, word has it, kind of like on the dock. I haven't been out yet, but mostly spoons, and guys are catching fish on flashers and cut bait and flashers and flies. So there hasn't been too much of a plug bite yet. There's been a few fish caught on J plugs, but that'll start picking up around the 1st of August.
That first couple of weeks of August, I mean, that's it, isn't it? That's the hot spot, hot time.
Yeah, those fish have showed up. Not many of them are up the river. And that's, if you look at the leaderboard at Captain Chuck's the last couple of years, it always seems like those bigger fish are caught in that first or second week of August. There was actually a 36-pounder caught 2 weeks ago up here, which for this time of year, that's a giant.
36-pounder 2 weeks ago, Bobby. You get into August, that could be pushing the weight of your fish.
Yeah, could be. I don't quite know the growth on those fish when they get that big.
Yeah.
But yeah, that could be pushing, mid-40s, if not the size of our fish are bigger.
What was the date? The August what when you caught your fish?
That was August 7th.
August 7th. All right, so we've talked about the gear, the change in gear from walleye to salmon. What about the mental aspect? Do you approach it differently? Is it a whole different ball game over there on Lake Michigan?
It is. We're trying to find temperature over here for the most part. Trying to find a thermocline if there is one set up. You're looking for that 49 to 54 degree water. Mostly like 51, 52. We will catch fish out at temp both ways, especially once you get towards the end of August when those fish are staging. You'll catch them in the warm water right out in front of the pier head some days. But, on the bay, I just try to cover the water top to bottom most days, where here we might be fishing, 200 foot of water, but we're really trying to work 20 or 30 or 30 foot of the water section.
So if it's water temp that you're looking for, I mean, what is the number? What's the ideal number you want to see on your probes?
I always try to look around that 50 to 54, and I'll keep that probe down. Normally, what I do is I put it on an out down, and I try to keep that rod right in that temperature range. Then I'll normally run my other rigger probably 10, 15 foot below it and 10 feet above it, on the other one. So I try to fish about 10 feet each way of it.
I'm just thinking in my own experience, and I used to fish Lake Michigan a lot. I used to fish deeper water. Like yesterday on the bay, I was in 13 feet of water. Bobby, I wouldn't even know where to start over 200 feet of water.
Yeah, and it's relying on that water temp. And like I say, you will catch fish out of water temp. The best thing to do if you don't have a probe is kind of talk to people at the dock, try to figure out where it's at. We do have a Ludington weather buoy that gives the water temp every 10 foot down. You can get online and look that up, the Ludington weather buoy. That'll give you a good start on where to go, like water temperature wise. And if you don't know where it's at, I mean, if you're running copper rods, I'd run like a 1, 2, and 300 copper on each side of the boat. And normally the fish are going to be in one of those ranges.
Is lead core even a thing for kings anymore?
Yeah. When that break gets 50 degrees or 50 foot and higher, one of my best rods last year was a 7 color all throughout the year. So just for some reason that, when we were fishing offshore, that rod was going really good for everything from steelhead, cohos, kings, lake trout. Then when we were out fishing on the bank and 100 foot of water, we were still catching fish on that 7 color. So I pretty much had a 7 color out the whole time.
7 colors.
For some reason, it seemed to be in the right range all year.
I'm not sure I want to catch a fish bad enough to reel it in from 7 colors out.
Yeah, well, 7 colors, it's not quite 10 colors, but, that you don't have as much line out as like a 300 copper with a 7 color. So, yeah. Once we get them on like a 300, 350, when we're out fun fishing, I don't even get up. I'm like, hey, that's your guys' rod.
That's your fish.
Yep.
Man, you gotta give fellow trollers a lot of leeway behind their boat these days running those kind of lengths.
Yeah, you do. And for the most part, everyone is really good about it. So every once in a while you'll get into an issue, but I try to keep from getting into those issues.
Oh, yeah, sure, for sure. How about openings, Bobby? You got trips you can sneak people in yet this summer?
Yeah, I think I have like 4 or 5 open mornings in August. I have a handful of afternoons still open, but I still have a couple of mornings open. Then in September for my river trips, I'm probably 3/4 of the way full. So I assume once I get over here fishing and I start throwing some pictures on Facebook, it'll kind of remind some people, hey, I need to get a trip booked with you. So I'm sure I'll be booked up here in the next week or 2.
All right, Bobby. I'm glad to hear that. If people want to book a trip with you, Bobby Sullivan, Captain Bobby Sullivan of Icebreaker Charters, go to his website, icebreakerfishingcharters.com. That's icebreakerfishingcharters.com. Have a good king season, Bobby, and we'll be talking again.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Always a pleasure talking to Captain Bobby Sullivan. Again, the website, icebreakerfishingcharters.com, icebreakerfishingcharters.com. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine show. When we come back, Joanne Forman from the DNR, there is another invader out there. We hear about these, whether they're aquatic invaders or avian invaders or insect invaders. Well, we'll find out what it is this time around and what the DNR wants you to do about it. Then our Ask Avery segment talks about processing wild game. The question was directed to me about my bear meat, and I thought, well, why should I answer this? We'll bring in the expert himself, Nick Grillo of Michigan Brad. So that's all coming up in hour 2 of this week's Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Flint on Sports Extra 1330 WTRX. You can hear us in Houghton Lake on the Twister 92.1 WTWS. And you can hear us north of the bridge in the Sioux on News Talk 1400 WKNW. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by the Linwood Beach Marina and Campground. Linwood Beach can be your year-round Saginaw Bay fishing destination and your Mid-Michigan tracker and angler Qwest and Polar Craft headquarters as well. Linwood Beach, the perfect spot on Saginaw Bay to launch your boat. You're right there near the fishing grounds. A great marine mechanics, friendly people, ship store, boat launch. I can't say enough. Check them out online at linwoodbeachmarina.com, linwoodbeachmarina.com. And I will be at Linwood Beach Marina, now that I think about it, next weekend for the Angler Qwest Owners Tournament as well. I forgot to talk about that with Brad Dupuie. I should have done that. LinwoodBeachMarina.com. Right now, they'll want to turn our attention to yet another invasive critter. I guess invading has a different connotation than invasive, doesn't it? With us to learn more about this, Joanne Forman from the DNR. Joanne, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm well, Mike. Thanks for having me. Unfortunately, I seem to always be the bearer of bad news, or at least invasive news.
And what do you have for us this time, Joanne?
Well, we are wanting to talk about the invasive spotted lanternfly. Now, this is a very icky bug that has the potential of becoming a real nuisance in Michigan. This summer, the Michigan Invasive Species Program is encouraging everybody across the state to see it, squish it, and report it.
Taking no prisoners on this one, eh, Joanne?
Absolutely not. Not with this insect. Absolutely not.
So how are we going to know what it is? What does it look like? Where would we see it?
Yeah, that's important. So we do have one known infestation in a small area of Oakland County that we detected last year. That's being treated. But the thing about these spotted lanternflies is they're hitchhikers. So we're worried about them coming into other places, not just from that site in Oakland County, but from a lot of states on the eastern side of the U.S. They've got a lot of heavy infestations there, and these bugs can hop on your cars, get in your camping gear, and if you happen to be visiting out in an infested area, you might accidentally bring it into your backyard. So we absolutely don't want that.
Yeah.
Yeah, bad news. So there's a couple stages of spotted lanternfly development, which makes it kind of hard for folks to get a handle on what to look for. But right now we're in the juvenile stage, and they're tiny. They're about a quarter to a half inch, and they look like beetles, okay? They're black with white spots. As they get a little older, they get some red on their backs along with the black and the white spots. So right now we're looking for clusters of little beetles. If you see something like that, take a picture of it and send it in to us, and we can diagnose whether that's what you got or not. The real actual spotted lanternfly that people are getting more familiar with, the adult stage. Now, that's about an inch long. It's a plant hopper, so it kind of sits with folded wings on tree branches or tree bark or your deck or whatever. It's kind of pinkish winged, pinkish to gray winged with black spots. And they're not real big. But we want people to look for those. Usually those will start maturing in August through October. So we got a little bit of time before we're looking for those adults, but we really want people to get familiar. And I know we're on the radio, but you can look for those at michigan.gov/spotted lanternfly. We've got an array of photos to get you familiar with what we're looking for.
Michigan.gov/spotted lanternfly?
Yes, all one word. If you want the short version, you could go michigan.gov/SLF. Either one will get you there. Now,
you said to send pictures into you. How would somebody send a picture to you guys so you can, how do we send it to the right place? Where do we send it, Joanne?
Yes. Okay, so if you go to that web page, right on top there's a report it button. It's going to take you to a simple form that you can place a dot on the map where you saw the bug. You can upload your photos and give us some information about where, how many, etc. It's real easy to fill out, and you just pop in that report and send it along to us, and we look at them every day.
I love this campaign. See it, squish it, report it. I love the squish it part of this, but obviously, if you get an infestation, squishing these things isn't going to solve the problem. Can we spray for them? How do you fight them?
Well, that's the tricky part. So right now, what we're doing with Oakland County is actually Oakland County's doing a lot of work, but we're treating the trees that they like to feed off of because they suck sap. So if we treat the tree with injection or another chemical, we can they'll suck that up and then they'll die. It's a lot better and it's a lot healthier for the environment than full-on spraying, which can kill a lot of our beneficial insects.
Joanne, let's get you on the show sometime to talk about a fun subject.
Oh, could you please?
All right, Joanne.
I would appreciate that.
I appreciate this information, and I always enjoy talking with you. The problem is, it's always about creepy critters, or icky bugs, as you call them, but I appreciate it. Thanks, Joanne. We'll talk again.
Thanks, Mike.
Joanne
Bye-bye.
Forman from the Michigan DNR, the website for the Michigan DNR, michigan.gov/DNR. There you can find more about the spotted lantern fly, also known as an icky bug. If you see it, squish it. I love that. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine Show. When we come back, this week's Ask Avery segment deals with the topic of specifically, my bear meat, the bear I shot in Ontario, how it's being processed. And I thought, well, the guys at Michigan Brand are doing it, so why don't I bring in Nick Grillo of Michigan Brand to answer the question? We will do just that. And in our third hour, Randy Cornell talks about fishing inland lakes in northern Michigan, and we'll wrap it all up with wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Miner. That's coming up yet this week right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine Show on WKBZ in Muskegon. That's 1090 AM. You can hear us in the Thumb on WMIC 660 AM, 95.3 FM. And you can hear us north of the bridge in Manistee on WTIQ 1490 AM, 95.3 FM. The Ask Avery segment is brought to you each week by the good folks at Security Credit Union. Security Credit Union loves to work with outdoorsmen and women, and they can help you with your next outdoor adventure. Check them out online at securitycu.org. That's securitycu.org. This week's question comes from Patrick Dean. He actually sent it to me on Facebook. The best way to do this, by the way, is to send me an email, mike@mikeaveryoutdoors.com, mike@mikeaveryoutdoors.com. But Patrick messaged me on Facebook. He says, Mike, are your bear brats made fresh style or smoked? And I had to think about that for a minute. And I thought, well, if I've got to think about this, why not just bring the man himself on here? Because my bear brats are being done by the folks at Michigan Brand Meats. Well, Nick Grillo of the Grillo family is from Michigan Brand. He's a friend of mine. I thought, why not just bring Nick onto the show and we'll address it this way. And he's with us now. Nick, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Hey, Mike. Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing real good. Real good. How are things in the world of Michigan Brand this summer?
Busy as heck right now, so that's a great problem to have, but we love it. It's
busy as good.
Travel season of the summer and everything, so everybody's on the road buying jerky, so we're having a great time.
Excellent. All right, so the question is, and I sent you this earlier, and you guys are processing my bear for me. We're making bear brats and burger. But on those brats, Patrick's question is, are your bear brats fresh or smoked? What's the answer, Nick?
Yep, so they actually are smoked. They're 100% cooked already when the individual would come pick them up, and so that's going to be the same way with your brats. Is they'll be 100% good to go. So you could take them out of the package and eat them nice and cold like that, or obviously most people are going to throw them right on the grill and heat them back up that way and eat them just like a good old brat. But kind of makes it easier that way to not have a fresh brat, because then they're only good for that week or so unless you freeze them. So we like to smoke them all completely, and then that way too you can throw them in your lunch pail and take them to lunch, or you can, like I said, keep them in the fridge for quite a while before you would have to freeze them if you're not going to grill them up that weekend, and go from there.
Well, and with something like a bear, that you got to make sure you cook bear meat all the way. That does make sense, because you guys at Michigan Brand, then you take care of that, cooking that completely, so we don't have to worry about getting into trouble in our backyard on the grill.
Yeah, exactly. That's a real good point. And just a reminder, every sausage that we make, we add 50% of our own pork. So it's the same thing for the brats this way. It's 50% of your bear meat and then 50% of our pork. So it does get down on that wild game taste a little bit, but puts a little fat in there for those different kinds of wild game you could bring in.
Now, Nick, you and I work together, but you're not doing this just as a favor to me. This is a service you guys offer to anybody, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, bear is pretty common being in Michigan, and like you did, you go up to Canada and people bring bear meat back, but every year we'll get deer meat, we'll get elk. Every year we usually get a little bit of caribou meat from, whether it's from Alaska or if it is way up in Canada. But we get goose meat, we get duck meat. So every year, it's not just deer. It's a wild variety of meat that people bring in and want either jerky made into or sausage. And we have the whole list right on our website.
And these days, with the threat of disease and stuff, things have changed. I can't just bring in a gutted carcass to you guys. It's got to be ready to go.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. So we're a USDA inspected facility. And part of that is we can bring in whole carcasses, like you mentioned. So we used to years and years ago, but we can't bring in a deer and process it for anybody anymore. So we do need the meat off the bone. You can bring in a whole big, like let's say the hindquarter, if you cut the meat off the hindquarter and just take it off the bone, you can bring it in like that. You don't have to trim it up yourself into steaks or sausage meat. You can just bring in the whole hindquarter as long as it's cut off the bone, and we'll take it from there. We'll cut it up for jerky or we'll grind it for sausage, whatever you want to do.
We haven't set a date, but we've agreed in concept. We're going to do another Wednesday night live at one of your plants, aren't we?
Would love to. Yeah, we've been talking about it for a little bit. We did that one. Heck, what was that, 4 years ago now?
It's been a while now,
yeah. Something like that.
Yeah.
And it was at our new Frankenmuth facility, and would love to show the process. And this is kind of a great idea. Maybe we can do it for something like this, where we can take a chunk of meat from either one of our wild game animals or something like this and process it together and show how the whole process is made.
Excellent, Nick. I appreciate that. The website, michiganbrand.net. People always ask me, where can I get Michigan brand products? If you go to the website, michiganbrand.net, there's a store locator right there, and Michigan brand is available all over the place these days, including the outstanding, world-famous Mike Avery Hunter Sticks, michiganbrand.net. And again, a big thanks to the folks at Security Credit Union for making each week's Ask Avery segment possible. Check them out online at securitycu.org. That's securitycu.org. We will take a break for the top of the hour. When we come back in hour number 3, Randy Cornell talks about fishing inland lakes in northern Michigan. He's a fishing guide. And then wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Miner. I bet he has a fish recipe for us in hour 3 of Outdoor Magazine.
Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Mike Avery has covered the outdoors in Michigan for more than 4 decades, and that tradition continues today. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Eider Insurance Group, Angler Qwest Pontoons and Polar Craft Boats, the Forward Corporation, Primal Outdoors, Security Credit Union, Garber Chevrolet, Brenton USA Hunting Rifles, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Well, thank you, Ken Hunter, for that introduction, and welcome to hour number 3 of this week's Outdoor Magazine radio show right here on the Outdoor Magazine Radio Network. And so glad to have you along with us as we are now right squarely in the middle of summertime. And as a result, much of the topic of discussion on this week's show has been fishing related. Now, when it gets to be October, November, we'll talk probably more hunting related topics. But right now, fishing is primarily what's going on. I want to turn our attention now to a guy named Randy Cornell. Randy is a northern Michigan fishing guide. He concentrates on inland lakes, maybe some rivers as well. His website is carmasportfishing.com, C-A-R-M-A, sportfishing.com. And Randy is a very, very interesting guy and an interesting person to talk with here on the Outdoor Magazine radio show. Randy, welcome back. How have you been?
Not too bad, Mike. Yourself?
I've been doing just great. So tell me a little bit about your history. I mean, you've done a lot of things in your life. How did you get to where you are right now?
Oh, I was very fortunate to receive my education in life by 2 of the greatest fishermen I ever met. One was my father, Joanne Cornell. and the other one was Captain Emil Dean on the Mary E. out of Manistee, Michigan.
Emil Dean. Now, there's a name I haven't heard for a while, but man, he was a pioneer.
He absolutely was. He set the mark and put a bar out there for all charter captains to reach, and the man made his living out of fishing.
And how did you end up under his wing?
Well, my dad's boat was parked 6 or 7 boats down from Emil's, and as I got older and became more of a fisherman, by the time I was 14 years old, I was hanging around the docks, and Emil needed a mate. He asked my dad if I could work for him, and next thing you know, I'm living on the Mary E.
What a dream job for a kid.
Oh, it was fabulous. And I did that all the way through high school. I spent 4 fishing seasons with Emil from South Haven, Michigan, all the way up to Frankfurt.
I'll bet you worked your young rear end off, though, didn't you?
They were some mighty long days. But, man, talk about the memories. I had the opportunity to fish with people from the media like yourself, Bob Garner, Mort Neff, Jerry Chiapetta, lots of guys.
How this may seem like a dumb question or a stupid question or a weird question, so I apologize right up front. How was fishing different back then? Because I know in my own experience, just the process, the way we fished was a lot different than what we do these days.
I believe it was better. We had more fish to fish for, and the fish.
Did I lose you? Okay, I lost you there for just a second, Randy. So just to cover that phone glitch we had, was it simpler? Was it a more basic way to fish than what we do these days?
Yeah, everything was artificial lures, so I would say that it was easier to fish for them. We used cannonballs. We didn't do any long lining. Everything was done, right under the boat, 4 or 5 foot behind a cannonball. Dodgers and flies, cowbells and J-plugs, the jigadoo behind a school of minis. And then as fishing started to change and we started concentrating more on kings, then we started with more spoons. And then, of course, today, they use a lot of meat rigs.
And then also as part of this process, you were in the Coast Guard too, right?
Yes, sir. 1978, I joined the Coast Guard. Was very fortunate to have been transferred all over the United States, from Miami, Florida, to Kodiak, Alaska, and ended up in Kansas for a while.
Kodiak, Alaska. I've seen that. I've seen that base. That's pretty impressive place.
It is, and very busy.
What was that like? I've always thought that being a coastie would have been a great career.
It was a fabulous career. It afforded me the opportunity to see all of the United States, fish for almost every freshwater species there is, including grayling, and hunt in places that other people dream of going to. Being in the service allows you the opportunity to buy resident tags no matter where you're at, and you get to go hunting at a significantly better price.
Yeah. Well, and so these days, though, maybe I'm wrong here, Randy, but I was thinking that your fishing business concentrated primarily on the inland lakes more than the big water. Is that the case?
It does.
Okay.
I only fish on inland lakes. It's a completely different fishery. We don't have to worry about storms. and high winds, as long as we can steer the boat, we can fish. We don't have to worry about 4 or 5 foot waves.
That's the upside, but there's got to be some downsides too, right? You don't have as much water, the fish aren't as big. I mean, or am I missing the point here?
Well, it depends. My own opinion is that I can catch almost as many fish. It may take me a lot longer on inland lakes as I could if I drove over to the bay. So I prefer to spend my time fishing over driving.
Driving, sure. So what lakes do you concentrate on? And is it all lakes, or are you a river guide as well?
I'm down to just lakes. The river fishing's not been good enough, and with the creel reduction to 1 steelhead per person, there's just not enough over there to go fishing for anymore. But so we focus now on just inland lakes. We fish Lake Mitchell a lot, Houghton Lake, Lake Misaki, and this year we have started to offer inland lake fishing for trout, Atlantic salmon, kokanee, whitefish, muskies, northerns on Torch Lake, and lake trout and northern pike on Higgins Lake.
You mentioned Atlantic. I'm fascinated by those fish. Torch Lake, Higgins Lake, beautiful bodies of water. Mitchell and Houghton. You could not have picked 2 lakes with more recreational boat traffic, though, I don't think, could you?
Well, there is a lot of recreational boat traffic, but that's always close to the shoreline, not where I'm typically fishing. So you get a little boat action from their wakes, but that's like walleye chop on a calm day, so I'm not complaining a whole lot.
So you've learned how to deal with that.
Yes, and I have learned where to fish, where I can find consistent patterns of weed beds and how the fish are relating to it. And that's typically not close to shore. So
is it easier in some ways, Randy, to dissect a finite body of water like Houghton? Now, there's a lot of water there, but it's you can see the boundaries of it, than it is, say, a Lake Michigan or Saginaw Bay or Lake Erie. Is it a different process, or is it the same thing, just smaller scale?
The lure presentation would be smaller scale, but the actual figuring out what fish are going to do on the big lake, you'd run out typically to the shelf at 80, 70, 80, 90 foot of water, run a temperature probe down, find the 55-degree water break, and start fishing there. On the inland lakes, you're looking for surface temperatures 70 to 75 degrees, and then you try to find where the established weed beds are and work the edges of them, because that's where the fish tend to set up for the summer.
We're talking with Randy Cornell of Carma Sportfishing, CARMA Sportfishing.com is the website. Got to take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine show. When we come back, I want to talk more with Randy about this process. Fishing inland lakes, which really, I'll be honest, I talk more about Great Lakes fishing. I do. I admit that, because that's kind of my passion. But there are more people who fish inland lakes in this state than whoever, I suspect, than whoever wander out in the Great Lakes. So I'm going to take this opportunity to pick Randy's brain. He's been doing this a long time, about how to fish an inland lake, what species to target, where to fish. Now, we can't get into specifics of your lake, right? But in general, we're going to find out more with Randy Cornell of CarmaSportFishing.com after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Holland on WHTC 1450 AM, 99.7 FM. You can hear us in Lansing on WILS, 1320 AM. And you can hear us in Traverse City on WTCM, 580 AM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Reeder Landscaping. Reeder can take care of your lawn and property because it's your nature and our nurture. Let Reeder create an outdoor getaway in your backyard, as they have for me. They've done several projects at my house. The most recent one, I was so glad to see these guys do this. We had mulch in our landscaping around the house, and I grew to hate that mulch. Every time the wind blew, it would blow out of the beds, and it would just make a mess. And after a while, it didn't look nice. So I got in touch with the folks at Reeder and said, what can we do? They said, well, we could put stone in there. And I went, aha, stone. Now that's something that's going to stay there for a while. So the guys came over, they took out all the old mulch, they put down a weed barrier, they filled these things with stone, and I actually had to go in there the other day because I wanted to bury some landscape lighting wires. They were very generous with the stone, and they could have done less, and I never would have known it, but they put in several inches of stone. They did a great job. They're hard workers. Reeder can do all of your backyard projects. Turn your backyard into an outdoor getaway. They can come over, look at your property. They can come up with a concept. They can come up with a design. They can do the construction, and then they can do the maintenance. It's like your one-stop shop for landscaping. Check them out online at reederlandscaping.com. That's reederlandscaping.com. Remember, every hour the folks from Reeder spend at your place doing work, it's another hour you can spend in the woods or on the water. reederlandscaping.com. We're talking right now with Randy Cornell. His website is Carma Sportfishing, CARMA Sportfishing.com. Randy, before the break, you were talking about Lakes Mitchell and Houghton and expanding into Torch Lake and Higgins Lake. So you've got your original bodies of water, smaller, shallower, and now these new bodies you're looking at are real deep water lakes. That's got to be a whole different situation, maybe even a different mindset for you.
Oh, it is. And what I did to find some success right off the bat was, having grown up out on Lake Michigan fishing for salmon and lake trout with downriggers, it was an easy transition to Torch and Higgins. I just put downriggers on the boat. I'm using 8-pound cannonballs instead of 12-pound, and I'm using smaller artificial lures. And instead of the 4 or 5 inch moonshiner spoon, I'm pulling the same size spoons, in that 2 to 3 inch size that guys use over on Saginaw Bay.
Ah, gotcha. And Atlantics, I've never caught an Atlantic, but I've heard a lot about them and I've done some research. I don't see a downside to an Atlantic. To me, it seems almost the perfect salmon species for Michigan today.
I believe so. And that is a year-round fishery in the fact that they're landlocked. They're going to be on Torch Lake somewhere. All you have to do is, once you get on them, stay with them.
And how do you do that? 'Cause to me, that's a challenge. You can, anybody can stumble into fish on a given day, but to find them day after day, that's not always easy.
No, but I always start in the deep water with my temperature probe. I'm going to find that 55-degree break in the temperature, and that's where I'm going to start looking to find fish. And then I just move around until I find a concentration, because you may find 55-degree water 50 feet down in 60 to 100 foot of water. So you have to apply the science that we've learned over the years to the lake that you're fishing, and then go after first the basic, find that water temperature, and then determine what the fish want. And fish talk to me.
I wish they would talk in a language I could understand, Randy.
Oh, they do. They do. They will tell you how fast they want that lure to be presented, at what depth they want it to be presented. And if you pay attention to where the hook is when you pull it out of their mouth, it'll tell you what level of feeding they are at. If they're hooked at the very front lip of the mouth, they're not really interested. They're just kind of reacting. But if it's down inside their mouth, down in their gullet, they are actively feeding, and that's where you need to be fishing.
Do you consider yourself, Randy, to be more of a trout and salmon guy or a walleye bass type guy?
My preferred fish is walleye. It's a predominant fish in the small lakes that I fish, but I am going to use my knowledge and experience from big lake fishing on Houghton and Higgins and offer people another opportunity to take their families and go fishing on small bodies of water.
You partially answered my next question. I was going to ask you, where do your clients come from? Are they tourist vacationers who just happen to be in the area? Are they anglers looking for some insight? Are they residents of a lake wanting you to help them dissect the water?
All of the above. A lot of them are people that just want to go out and learn to fish that specific body of water. So we open up everything in the boat. We show them all of the products that we use from all the manufacturers, like HT Enterprises, and people might say, wait, that's ice fishing. Well, HT now has a complete line of open water series, rod, reels, and combinations. We use stuff from Minnesota that I've gotten associated with because it's different lures than what the fish are used to seeing here. And I show them how I run my rigs and how I present the lures, from bottom bouncers all the way up to, shallow running crankbaits with planer boards, without planer boards. I'll give them a full day's lesson, and we catch fish, and hopefully they go out and do the same thing on their boat.
Okay, so somebody hires you to fish a particular body of water. Let's say it's Houghton Lake. And you take them out and show them how to catch fish, and you show them some of your better spots because you want them to catch fish. Do you then see those people in their own boat out there the next day? I mean, what's to prevent those people from taking over your spot?
There's nothing to prevent people from taking over my spot because I don't own it to begin with. The lakes belong to all of us. And it's okay if I see them out because that gives me information on, one, how well I'm doing at showing people how to fish that body of water, and two, they keep in touch with me. So if the fish move, that's an additional resource for me to contact and find out where I have to shift and what I need to do that maybe will keep the fish coming. Because everybody goes through a slump when you're fishing.
That's a great attitude. I love that theory or that philosophy. So that's probably one of the reasons why you've been successful for so long.
I would hope so. That, and we really tried to focus on families. Yesterday we had a trip late in the day, and it was a grandfather and his two grandsons. And we started the day trolling for walleye, picked up a couple of real nice walleye out of Lake Mitchell, and one of the boys was 7, the other one was 9, and all they talked about was bass fishing. So at 5 o'clock, we were done trolling. I said, okay, boys, we're going to go bass fishing. We're going to put all this stuff away, and I'm going to get the spinning rods out, and I'm going to show you guys how to use wacky rigs, and we're going to catch some bass. And we spent the next 2 hours with those two young tykes casting their arms off and catching. They caught 4 bass, and one of them caught a 22-inch pike. So Grandpa's taking pictures. The boys are having fun. What a great way to spend your day.
Oh, I can't think of a better way. And as you were describing this, I was picturing this grandpa with a big smile on his face for sure.
Absolutely. And there were 2 grandpas on the boat, so it was real simple for me to do that.
And if I would have been with you, there'd have been 3 grandpas on the boat too. So yes. I can relate completely.
I get so much more out of watching young people grab onto what I'm telling them and seeing them use it and become successful at it and put fish in the boat. There's just so much pleasure that you can gain from sharing your experiences with the younger generation that's willing to learn.
And we, as this older generation, I think we have a responsibility to do that these days.
Absolutely. So much so that I have a 9-year-old grandson, and for his professional career day at his school out in Kansas, he chose to be like his pop-up and dressed like his pop-up as a fisherman. So I have had input on what he wants to do. He wants to grow up and be a fisherman like pop-up.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think it's so cool that you've spent your entire life on the water with your dad, with Emil Dean, the Coast Guard, now teaching people to fish. Randy Cornell, you're an interesting guy, and I love having you here on the show. I'll send people to your website, karmasportfishing.com, karmasportfishing.com. Good fishing to you, Randy. We'll talk again.
Same to you, Mike. Always a pleasure.
Pleasure is mine. Randy Cornell, CARMA Sportfishing.com, CARMA Sportfishing.com. If you want to talk about fishing inland lakes for salmon, for trout, for walleye, for bass, for pike, Randy is your guy. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine Show. When we come back, a few more things I want to talk about, shoot the breeze about, and then we'll bring in wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Miner. I've been trying to get Dave out on Saginaw Bay walleye fishing this summer. And I think, actually, we're going to do a trip with Art Lewis of WSGW and wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Miner and a friend of mine, hopefully from the Great Lakes Bay Convention and Visitors Bureau. So we're getting real close to coming up with a date. I'm going to sneak these guys in while the fishing is still good. Anyway, we'll take a break. Lots more coming up right here on Outdoor Magazine. I was looking at Charlie. He was waiting to press the button to open the mic. Little frivolity here in the studio. Welcome back to Outdoor Magazine. My name is Mike Avery. So glad to have you along with us as we continue this adventure into the outdoor lifestyle here in Michigan, promoting, encouraging, defending, educating. I don't, it's just a radio show, right? I don't mean to make this thing into too grandiose of a topic, but it is kind of a nice platform to have to talk about such things. And I also need to talk about where you can find us. WMLQ in Manistee, 97.7 FM, WIOS in Tawas, 1480 AM, 106.9 FM, and WSGW in Saginaw, News Radio 790 and 100.5 FM. I'm in the studios of WSGW right now. For these 3 hours, I'm calling it the Outdoor Magazine Studio. I am. Nobody's tried to stop me yet because I have a logo behind me that kind of points out to the fact. And you know I'm in here with Charlie Rue doing a great job, as always. There they are. I'm looking out the window. I can see them lining up. It's almost lunchtime. People are bringing their children here to the studio because they want to get a glimpse of Charlie when he leaves. What they don't know is that Charlie comes in here about 3 o'clock in the morning and doesn't leave till 7 at night. So they're going to have a long, he's shaking his head, yeah, a long wait. Oh, something's going on I forgot to talk about. It's kind of a big deal. I haven't personally heard it yet, but I've had 2 reports of cicadas. You know, the buzzing in the trees that eventually here in the next couple of weeks is going to drive you crazy. What does that mean? Well, the old saying, and you know, I love these old sayings because there's a grain of truth in all of these old sayings, I believe, or they wouldn't get passed down. They wouldn't become folklore and get passed down from generation to generation if there wasn't some germ of seed in there somewhere, at least, right? What I always grew up hearing was, from the time you hear the first cicada buzz until the first frost will be 6 weeks. Well, that's not true. Because when my dad was still around, he and I used to keep track of this. No, it's not 6 weeks. And it's not even 8 weeks. It's probably closer to 10 weeks. But I guess the question becomes, if the cicadas buzz early, does that mean it's going to frost early? And I should check my calendar because I try to keep this is one thing that I try to keep a note of over the years, when I hear the first cicada buzz and then when the first frost is. But I love these old sayings. You know, what am I talking about? Oh, well, when the wind is from the east, the fishing is the least. That type of thing. Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky in morning, sailors take warning. Little sing-songy things. Sometimes they seem to make sense, sometimes they don't. But again, there is some truth in all of these. And I haven't looked at it for a while. I haven't gone there for a while, but I have kept a blog, and it's on my website somewhere, of these old sayings. If you go to MikeAveryOutdoors.com, and search for old sayings, I've got a list of them all there, including some that people have sent me. You know, some that I have remembered, some that were repeated in my family, and then a lot of them that people have sent me. If you've got something like that, outdoor related, send it to me. Mike at MikeAveryOutdoors.com, Mike at MikeAveryOutdoors.com. With your permission, I will add it to that blog, giving you credit for sending it along. But some of these are very interesting, and they come from a time, I believe, when our society in general was more in tune to the natural world. And that is something that I see. It concerns me that I feel like as a society we're getting away from such things. As a society, I believe we are becoming more technologically astute and more social media concerned and less concerned with the real world. And believe me, I see both sides of this because I am at heart a geek. I love technology. I love gadgets. I love how I can reach people using different social media outlets. So I get that. But, you know, back when people were farmers, I look at my own family. My grandpa was, he worked for the road commission, but he was also a farmer. This guy knew more about the outdoors than anybody I've ever known. Honestly. He could tell things just by the way the air felt, the way the wind was. And he passed that knowledge along to my dad. Now, I suspect my dad would have been the first person to acknowledge that he wasn't as knowledgeable about such things as his dad, my grandpa, was. My dad passed knowledge down to me, and I know for a fact that guy knew far more than I ever will. Hopefully, I passed some things along to my son, James, and I'll tell you what, this guy's sharp. When it comes to the outdoors, hunting and fishing, he's got it dialed in. And he passed that along to my grandson, Trent. So what is this? My granddad, my dad, me, James. That's 5 generations right there of the outdoors. So when I talk about the history and tradition of the outdoors, I have a personal interest in it. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll wrap it all up with wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Miner right here on Outdoor Magazine. Welcome back to Outdoor Magazine. It has been a fishing theme this week. Brad Dupuie, Mr. Angler Qwest, Bobby Sullivan, Charter Captain, Randy Cornell, inland fishing in northern Michigan. So it seems fitting that we would wrap up with a fish recipe. And it's not really a fish recipe, but it's kind of is it water related? I don't know. Let's bring in wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Miner to talk more about this. David, welcome back. How are you?
I'm very good, Michael, and yourself?
I am doing just great. So you want to do, what is it this week, Dave?
Snapping turtle stew.
Oh, that's a good one.
2 weeks ago, we started with some more underutilized wild game meats. Frog legs was one, crawdads. Now, a lot of people, they're bobber fishing in some of these backwater little inlets and whatever. Turtles will bite on a hook and line. And now that the season is open, you can keep them.
So I didn't even realize that we were so sophisticated on this show. We had a theme for our recipes. I am impressed, David.
Oh, well, now we'll start with fish after this week.
Turtle, let's hear it. I love it.
Okay, we did this for the TV show probably, 20 years ago or more.
Yeah.
We need a medium to a large turtle, anywhere from about 15 to 25 pounds. Be careful because they bite, and they can strike like a snake about 8 or 10 inches. They got a long neck. So you need about 5 large. This is going to be a very large batch. So you need 4 or 5 large potatoes diced up, medium size. You need a 12-ounce package of mushrooms, whole ones cut in half. The theme to this is nice, big, hearty chunks, of the meat and of the vegetables. You need four stalks of celery diced large, 1 onion or 2 onions, depending on your flavor requirements, diced large again, about 4 or 5 carrots diced large again. So now we've got quite a large batch of vegetables and like that. So you're going to have a big enough cooking vessel in order to control all of this. 4 or 5 cloves of garlic diced up fine, 1.5 cups of red wine. You don't really need it, but it really adds to the flavor. Need about a teaspoon of basil and salt and black pepper to taste. I would grate the black pepper all over the meat after you get it cut up. You need a couple of 3 jars of brown gravy and a 28-ounce can of diced tomatoes. So you're going to cut the meat after you skin it. It's kind of a hard little thing to skin, but some people drop the legs and the other parts and the neck into boiling water, and that helps skin it. I do a different thing. So anyways, I like to just skin it, dredge it in flour, cut it up into nice large pieces, brown it on all sides after you grate pepper all over it, and do it in small enough batches so you don't crowd it. Then you can add the onions, the celery, carrots, garlic, and spices. And you want to kind of saute this around for a few minutes just to kind of break the flavor loose. Add that red wine, and then place the meat and vegetables in an oven-proof casserole. And then top it over with the gravy, and cover and you bake it at 350 degrees until tender. Man, that's going to take a minimum of 2 hours. And then every 15 or 20 minutes, check it and see if the meat is falling off the bone. If it is, then it's definitely ready. Turtle is quite an elderly animal if it's that big, and it's usually pretty tough. But if you cook it long enough, it gets really like just fork tender. It falls right off of the bone.
How would you describe the taste? Is it light? Is it heavy?
There's numerous colors of meat. Like a chicken has got dark meat and light meat. So does a turtle. It's not really that they taste different. They're just different muscles, and they carry the blood differently, I guess. Like in the neck, it's going to be a lot lighter than, say, the flippers and the legs,
So
in about half hour before it's all done, you want to add the potatoes and the mushrooms. And then you can serve this over pasta or noodles, homemade biscuits, anything like that. It's just a killer recipe, Most people wouldn't understand about it, but that was our theme.
Well, and because for one thing, it's a lot of work. I mean, it's not like filleting out a bluegill or a walleye. You got to work to get this meat.
Right. What I do is I cut the head off real close up to the head, shove a garden hose down into the body cavity, and put a hose clamp on it and tighten it up really, really tight. So you have a lot of skin there, and then you crack the garden hose on real slow. And what happens is the water flows between the meat and the skin, and then it just does a beautiful job. You can hold a leg up, and the skin will just fall right off.
You just gave me a visual. I'm going to have a hard time shaking.
They'll stand, before they burst loose into some weak spot, they'll stand right up on their claws. It is a little gruesome, but boy, it does the job.
And if you would like to ask Dixie Dave about this, his cell phone number is 989.
Go right ahead.
Wild Game Chef Extraordinaire Dixie Dave Miner, a big part of the Outdoor Magazine show. And I love Dave because I never quite know where we're going to end up. But that's part of the fun. My name is Mike Avery. The website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. The email address, Mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com. If you would like to comment on anything you hear on this show, including Dixie Dave's thoughts, send me an email to Mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com, Mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com. Have a great week. Check out my social media outlets, and I'll talk to you next time right here on Outdoor Magazine.